Hi there, welcome to Fantasy Hub. I'm Mia, your storyteller. Today's story is filled with heartache, discovery, and a twist you won't see coming. So let's begin.
Some nights change everything. This is one of them. I'm Claire Young, 45 years old, and I should have been home hours ago, wrestling with the impossible task of translating diplomatic nuance from Russian into English. Instead, I found myself standing in the fluorescent lit aisles of a 24-hour convenience store at 11:47 p.m., desperately seeking caffeine and maybe a miracle to help me decode Ambassador Volkov's latest speech. The coffee machine hummed its mechanical symphony as I pressed the button for a double espresso. That's when I heard her voice for the first time. "Excuse me, do you know if this place sells decent film? Not the tourist stuff, actual film for someone who cares about grain. Structure?" I turned, and there she was. 20-something with wild auburn curls escaping from a messy bun, wearing a vintage leather jacket that had clearly seen adventures I could only dream of. Her eyes were the color of storm clouds, and when they met mine, something electric passed. "Between us, film?" I managed, feeling suddenly ancient in my pressed blazer and sensible heels. Like ... actual film? She laughed, a sound like wind chimes in a summer breeze. "I'm Kali, and yes, actual film. I'm a photographer, the kind who still believes in the magic of silver halide and darkroom chemistry." "Claire," I replied, extending my hand. Her fingers were warm, slightly stained with developer, and when she shook my hand, she held it just a moment longer than necessary. "And I'm afraid I'm more of a digital age dinosaur. I translate documents, not capture moments." "What kind of documents?" She leaned against the coffee counter, genuinely interested. Most people's eyes glazed over when I mentioned my work. "Diplomatic correspondence, Russian to English mostly. Tonight it's Ambassador Volkov's speech about cultural exchange programs. And I'm convinced he's either a poet or completely insane." Callie's face lit up. "Cultural exchange, that's fascinating. I've been documenting cultural intersections through street photography, the way different worlds collide and create something entirely new." I found myself studying her face as she spoke, noting the passion that animated her features, the way her hands moved to illustrate her points. There was something magnetic about her enthusiasm, something that made my carefully ordered world suddenly feel small and colorless. "Would you ... I began, then stopped. What was I doing? "Would you like to grab actual coffee somewhere? Somewhere that doesn't sell lottery tickets and energy drinks?" Her smile was radiant. "I thought you'd never ask." 20 minutes later, we sat in an all-night diner, steaming mugs between us, and the city glittering beyond rain-streaked windows. Kali had ordered black coffee and apple pie. I had stuck with espresso and tried not to stare as she talked about her latest project. "I'm documenting the overnight city," she explained, gesturing with her fork. "The people who keep the world running while everyone else sleeps. Security guards, nurses, cab drivers, emergency dispatchers. There's this whole parallel universe that most people never see. Like insomnia-driven translators in convenience stores. Exactly like that." Her grin was mischievous. "Though you're the first one I've met who looks like she stepped out of a boardroom at midnight." I glanced down at my outfit, the navy blazer, the cream silk blouse, the pearl earrings my mother had given me. I suppose I do look rather ... corporate. Not corporate. Elegant. There's a difference. Callie's eyes grew serious. "You have this quality, like you're holding secrets. Important ones." The compliment sent warmth spreading through my chest. When was the last time someone had seen me as serious rather than simply professional? "What about you? Don't you sleep?" "Sleep is overrated. The best light happens when most people are unconscious. Dawn, dusk, the magic hours. Plus, I work at a gallery during the day, so my schedule's pretty backwards." "Which gallery?" "The Morrison Contemporary. We specialize in emerging artists. Alternative processes, experimental work. It's not glamorous, but it pays the rent on my darkroom." I knew the Morrison. I'd walked past it countless times on my way to client meetings, but had never gone inside. "I've always wondered what it would be like to see the world through an artist's eyes. Would you like to find out?" The question hung between us, loaded with possibility. I thought about my empty apartment, the Russian speech waiting on my desk, the routine that had defined my life for so many years. Then I looked at Kali, really looked at her, and saw something I hadn't seen in ages. Adventure? "Yes," I said. I would. Callie's apartment was everything mine wasn't. Where I had clean lines and neutral colors, she had organized chaos photographs. Pinned to every surface, books stacked in precarious towers, plants trailing from macrame hangers. Her darkroom occupied what should have been a bedroom, and she led me inside like a priestess revealing sacred mysteries. "This is where the magic happens," she said, switching on the red safety light. "Would you like to see how photographs are actually born?" I watched, mesmerized, as she moved through the ritual of development. Her movements were precise, almost choreographed, and I found myself studying the graceful lines of her neck, the concentration on her face as she lifted a print from the fixer bath. "It's like alchemy," I whispered. "It is alchemy." She hung the wet photograph on the line, and I gasped. It was a street scene, a homeless man sharing his sandwich with a stray dog, captured in perfect black and white. This was taken 3 nights ago, about 6 blocks from where we met. It's beautiful. Heartbreaking and beautiful. That's the thing about film photography. Every shot costs money, so you have to really see before you press the shutter. Digital photographers can take 1,000 images and hope one works. Film photographers have to be intentional. I understood something then about the difference between our worlds. Mine was built on precision and careful translation of existing meaning. Hers was about capturing fleeting moments and creating new meaning from them. "Claire," she said suddenly, turning to face me in the red light, "can I ask you something?" "Anything. Why do you look so sad? Even when you're smiling, there's the sadness in your eyes." The question caught me off guard. I opened my mouth to give a polite deflection, then found myself telling the truth instead. "I suppose because I've been alone for a very long time. Not just romantically, though, that too, but genuinely alone. I translate other people's words, but I rarely have anything of my own to say." Kali stepped closer. In the intimate space of the darkroom, I could smell her perfume, something warm and slightly smoky. "What would you say if you weren't afraid?" The question hung between us like a bridge I could either cross or ignore. I thought about all the safe choices I'd made, all the risks I hadn't taken, all the passion I'd carefully filed away in favor of security and respectability. "I'd say that I haven't felt this alive in years," I whispered. "I'd say that you make me want to be brave." Callie's hand found mine in the red-lit darkness, then be brave. When she kissed me, it was nothing like the careful, restrained relationships I'd had before. It was fire and urgency and the taste of possibility. Her hands tangled in my hair, messing up the careful style I'd worn to project competence and control. I didn't care. For the first time in years, I didn't care about projecting anything except the truth of what I was feeling. "Stay," she whispered. Against my lips, I thought about my empty apartment, my untranslated documents, my carefully ordered life waiting for me across the city. Then I thought about the woman in my arms, the way she saw beauty in late-night streets and homeless men sharing sandwiches. "Yes," I said. I woke up in Callie's bed to sunlight streaming through windows I hadn't noticed in the darkness. She was already awake, propped on one elbow, studying my face with the same intensity she brought to her photography. "Good morning, beautiful," she said, and I felt beautiful for the first time in years. "Good morning." I stretched, suddenly conscious of my rumpled clothes from the night before, my makeup smudged beyond recognition. "I must look terrible. You look real." Her finger traced the line of my jaw. "I've been thinking about last night." Anxiety spiked through me. Here it comes, I thought. The gentle letdown. This was fun, but conversation. And I want to see you again. I want to take you to places you've never been, show you things you've never seen. I want to know everything about you, what makes you laugh, what makes you cry, what you dream about when you think no one's watching. Relief flooded through me, followed quickly by terror. "Kali, I should tell you something. I've never been with a woman before. Last night was—" "Your first time?" I nodded, suddenly embarrassed. "How was it?" Her smile was gentle, encouraging. "Revolutionary," I said honestly, and she laughed. "Then we're off to a good start." The next few weeks passed in a blur of discovery. Kali kept her promise to show me new things. She took me to underground art shows in converted warehouses, introduced me to musicians who played experimental compositions at 3 a.m., guided me through street markets where vendors sold everything from vintage cameras to homemade tamales. But it was the quiet moments I treasured most. Watching her work in the darkroom, the way her face transformed with concentration. Waking up to find her already photographing the way morning light fell across my sleeping form. The conversations that stretched until dawn, where we mapped the geography of each other's hearts. Tell me about your family, she said one night, her head on my chest as we lay in her bed. There's not much to tell. My parents wanted me to be practical, stable. They were immigrants, my father from Ireland, my mother from Poland. They came here with nothing and built something solid. They saw my facility with languages as a path to security, not art. Do they know you're gay? The question hit like a physical blow. I didn't know I was gay until I met you. Collie lifted her head to look at me. Really? Really? I dated men because it was expected. I thought what I felt for them was love, but it was more like comfortable companionship. With you, it's like I'm finally awake. She kissed the hollow of my throat. What are you going to do about that? It was a fair question. I was 45 years old with a carefully constructed life that suddenly felt like an elaborate costume I could no longer wear. I don't know. Everything I thought I knew about myself has changed. Change can be terrifying, Collie said, but it can also be freedom. The conflict came, as conflicts do, from an unexpected direction. I was at a reception for international translators when I saw her, Elena Rodriguez, the embassy's cultural attaché and someone I'd worked with for years. She approached with a knowing smile that made my stomach clench. Claire, how lovely to see you here. And how interesting to see you with that young photographer from the Morrison Gallery last week. Quite the cultural exchange, wouldn't you say? The implication was clear. In diplomatic circles, gossip traveled faster than official communications. My relationship with Collie wasn't secret exactly, but I hadn't expected it to become embassy. Small talk. Collie Butler is a talented artist, I said carefully. I've been learning about contemporary photography. I'm sure you have. Elena's smile was razor sharp. Though I hope you're being discreet. You know how conservative some of our clients can be about these matters. The threat was subtle but unmistakable. My reputation, built over decades of meticulous work, could crumble if the wrong person decided my personal life was unprofessional. I thought about Ambassador Volkov, about the lucrative contracts that kept me financially secure, about the life I'd built through careful conformity. That night, I sat on Callie's fire escape, smoking. A cigarette, a habit I'd abandoned years ago, but had somehow picked up again in moments of stress. You're brooding, Callie observed, joining me with 2 cups of tea. Elena Rodriguez knows about us. She made it clear that my clients might not approve of my lifestyle choices. Your lifestyle choices? Callie's voice was dangerously quiet. You. Know what I mean? No, I don't. Say it clearly. I took a long drag of the cigarette, watching smoke dissolve into the city night. My relationship with a woman, my relationship with you. And what are you going to do about that? The question I'd been dreading. I thought about my apartment, my savings account, my professional reputation. But then I looked at Collie, her storm cloud. Eyes reflecting the city lights, her wild hair catching the breeze, her entire being radiating the kind of authentic passion I'd spent my life avoiding. I don't know, I said honestly, for the first time since I'd known her. Collie looked hurt. You don't know? This is complicated, Collie. You're 25 years old with a whole life ahead of you. I'm 45 with a career that could disappear. If I make the wrong choice, what if this doesn't work? What if you get tired of me? What if you stop being so fucking scared? Her words cut through my spiraling anxiety like a blade. I stared at her, seeing the pain I caused with my doubt. I'm not asking you to throw away your career, she said. I'm asking you to believe that what we have is worth fighting for. But if you can't do that, if you're going to let other people's prejudices dictate your choices, then maybe Elena Rodriguez is right to be concerned. She stood up, stubbing out her cigarette with more force than necessary. I'm going to bed. Join me if you decide you want to be brave. Don't if you'd rather be safe. I sat on that fire escape for hours, watching the city change from night to dawn. I thought about the woman I'd been before meeting Collie, careful, controlled, alone. I thought about the woman I was becoming, passionate, vulnerable, alive. When I finally went inside, Collie was awake, sitting at her kitchen table with a cup of coffee and contact sheets spread before her. I've been thinking, I said. And I sat down across from her, noting the photographs she'd been reviewing, all of them featuring me in various states of joy and abandon. Me laughing at something she'd said. Me sleeping in her morning light. Me dancing in her living room to music I'd never heard before. I've spent my entire adult life translating other people's words, other people's meanings. I've never had anything that was purely mine to say. I reached across the table, covering her hands with mine. You make me want to speak my own language for the first time, which is, I love you. The words came out simple and clean, no diplomatic complexity, no careful translation. I love your passion and your art, and the way you see magic in ordinary moments. I love that you make me brave enough to want things I've never wanted before. And yes, I'm terrified, but I'd rather be terrified with you than safe without you. Callie's smile was like sunrise breaking through storm clouds. Say it. Again, I love you. Again. I love you, Callie Butler. I love you enough to risk everything. She leaned across the table and kissed me, tasting like coffee and possibility. I love you too, Claire Young. All of you, the diplomat and the woman who dances in my living room. At 3 in the morning. The weeks that followed our declaration weren't without their challenges. Love, I discovered, was not just passion and poetry, it was also learning to navigate two very different ways of moving through the world. Callie lived spontaneously, deciding at noon to drive 3 hours to photograph sunset over a particular lake, staying up until dawn, chasing the perfect shot, sleeping through morning meetings she'd forgotten to write down. I lived by calendar notifications, client deadlines, and the careful choreography of professional obligations. You're beautiful when you plan, she said one evening, watching me organize my schedule on her kitchen table. Color-coded pens, printed. Calendars, sticky notes in perfect rows. It's like watching someone conduct an orchestra. You're beautiful when you don't plan, I replied, looking up from my meticulous annotations. It's like watching someone dance with the universe. We're quite a pair, we are, but our differences created friction too. The morning I woke to find she'd left for a 3-day photo expedition without telling me, I felt abandoned in a way. That surprised me with its intensity. When I called her, hurt and confused, her phone went straight to voicemail. She returned with apologies and a contact sheet full of extraordinary images migrant workers at dawn, their faces etched with exhaustion and dignity, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being left behind. I didn't think you'd want to come, she said, genuinely puzzled by my hurt. You hate getting up early, and it was all manual labor and dust and terrible truck stop coffee. It's not about whether I'd want to come, I explained, trying to find words for something I barely understood myself. It's about being asked. It's about being considered. Understanding dawned on her face. You're not just my lover, are you? You're my partner, and partners consult each other. Even about terrible truck stop coffee adventures? Especially about those. We developed new rhythms, new ways of honoring both spontaneity and structure. I learned to build flexibility into my schedule, to say yes to unexpected adventures. She learned to give me advance notice when possible, to include me in her mental mapping of the future, even when that future was only 12 hours away. Night before her gallery exhibition opened, we lay in bed talking about the photographs she'd chosen to display. Many of them featured me, and I felt exposed in a way that had nothing to do with physical nakedness. Are you sure about this? I asked. Putting our relationship on display like this? Art is always personal, she said. But if you're uncomfortable, we can remove any image you don't want shown. I thought about it seriously. There was the photograph of me crying, not from sadness, but from overwhelm at a particularly beautiful sunset she dragged me to see. There was the one of me sleeping, my face soft and unguarded in morning light. There was the series she'd taken of my hands as I worked translating, writing, gesturing as I explained complex diplomatic concepts. No, I said finally, show them all. I want people to see who I am when I'm with you. Who are you when you're with me? I considered the question seriously. Alive. Completely, utterly alive. 6 months later, I stood in the Morrison Gallery, watching guests admire Callie's latest exhibition, Translation, a series of photographs exploring the space between cultures, languages, and hearts. The centerpiece was a triptych she'd titled, Claire, 3 images of me in different states of transformation. The first showed me in my diplomatic attire, composed and distant. The second captured me mid-laugh, hair messed up and guard completely down. The third was taken in the dark room, the red light transforming my face into something mysterious and beautiful. She's captured something extraordinary, said a voice beside me. I turned to find Ambassador Volkov himself, studying the photographs. With genuine appreciation, the artist sees beyond surface presentation to essential truth. This is rare gift. She is rare, I agreed. You know her personally? Here was the moment. I could deflect, maintain professional distance, protect my carefully constructed reputation, or I could choose honesty. She's my partner, I said. Personal and professional, she's teaching me to see the world through an artist's eyes, and I'm helping her understand the cultural context she photographs. The ambassador nodded thoughtfully. Cultural exchange at its most fundamental level. Beautiful work, both of yours. As he moved on to examine other pieces, I felt Callie's arm slide around my waist. How does it feel? She whispered. Scary, exhilarating, right. The holy trinity of good choices. I laughed, pulling her closer. Around us, the gallery buzzed with conversation and admiration for her work. My work, too, in a way I'd written. The artist statement translated some of her concepts for international visitors, even posed for a few of the pieces. We'd found a way to blend our worlds, to create something neither of us could have made alone. Claire, Collie said suddenly, her voice serious. I need to tell you something. My heart clenched. What? I've been offered a residency in Prague, 6 months, fully funded, documenting the intersection of Eastern and Western European cultures post-communism. The words hit like ice water. That's amazing. Congratulations. There's more. She turned to face me fully. They're looking for a cultural consultant, someone who understands diplomatic language, cultural nuance, translation, someone who could help contextualize what I'm documenting. Hope flickered in my chest. Are you asking? I'm asking if you want to come with me. If you want to take the biggest risk of your life and see what happens when we take our story international. I thought about my apartment lease, my client, contracts, the safe life I'd built through decades of careful choices. Then I looked at the woman who taught me that safety was just another word for sleepwalking. When do we leave? Her smile was radiant. Is that a yes? I just went for late night coffee and somehow found the love of my life. So, yes, let's go to Prague and see what other miracles are waiting. She kissed me then, right there in the middle of her exhibition in front of diplomats and art collectors and anyone else who might have opinions about our choices. It was passionate and public and completely unlike anything I would have done 6 months ago. But then again, 6 months ago, I was a different woman entirely. Now I was someone who believed in love at first sight and darkroom magic and the revolutionary power of choosing joy over safety. As we broke apart, I caught sight of our reflection in the gallery window, 2 women, different in age and background, but perfectly matched in the way we held each other. Looked at each other, completed each other's sentences and dreams. I love you, I whispered against her ear. I love you too, she whispered back. Ready for the next adventure? I looked around the gallery one more time at the photographs that told our story, at the people admiring our work, at the future spreading before us like an uncharted map. I'm ready for anything, I said, and for the first time in my 45 years, I absolutely meant it. Some nights change everything. That night in the convenience store, reaching for coffee and finding love instead, had changed everything. Now, every night held the possibility of magic, of transformation, of becoming someone new while remaining fundamentally true to who I'd always been underneath all the careful protection. I'd gone looking for caffeine and found my soulmate. I'd thought I was too old for grand gestures and life-altering romance. I'd been wrong about everything except this. Love doesn't follow schedules or respect age, differences, or care about professional reputations. Love just is. And sometimes, if you're very lucky and very brave, love finds you in a convenience store at midnight and changes your entire world with a simple question about film grain and a smile that lights up the darkness. As we walked out of the gallery together, Callie's hand warm in mine, I realized I'd finally learned to speak my own language. And the first word in that language, the most important word, was her name. As we walked out of the gallery together, Callie's hand warm in mine, I realized I'd finally learned to speak my own language. And the first word in that language, the most important word, was her name. But the story didn't end there. Life, I was learning, was not a single narrative arc, but a series of beginnings, each one building on what came before. 3 days after the gallery opening, as we sat in our favorite all-night diner planning our Prague adventure, Collie looked up from her notebook with an expression I'd learned to recognize as the precursor to either brilliance or trouble. I have an idea, she said. The last time you said that, I ended up posing nude for your Studies in Vulnerability series. That was art, this is business. She pushed her notebook across the table. Look, I read her careful handwriting, noting the way she organized her thoughts, a habit she picked up from me. Cultural translation services, photography meets diplomacy. Visual storytelling for international organizations, NGOs, cultural institutions. I looked up. You want to start a company? We want to start a company. Think about it, Claire. Understand the political and cultural nuances that most people miss. I can capture those nuances visually. Together, we could help organizations tell their stories more authentically. The idea was intriguing. I've been growing restless with pure translation work, hungry for something that felt more creative, more collaborative. What would that look like practically? Imagine the UN wants to document refugee experiences for a humanitarian report. Usually they'd hire a photographer to take pictures and a writer to craft the narrative. But what if they hired a team that understood both the visual language and the cultural context? What if we could ensure that the stories being told honored the complexity of people's experiences instead of reducing them to simple narratives of suffering or triumph? I felt excitement building in my chest. We could work with embassies, cultural exchange programs, international development organizations. Exactly. And the Prague residency would be our pilot project. 6 months of documenting cultural intersection, with you providing historical context and cultural analysis while I capture the visual story. I stared at her notebook, seeing not just an idea, but a future. Our future built on the intersection of our skills and passions. You've really thought this through. I've been thinking about it since the night you told me you wanted to speak your own language. This would be your language, Claire. Our language. The diner hummed around us late-night conversations, the clink of coffee cups, the eternal rhythm of people connecting over shared space and time. I thought about all the stories I translated that never told, all the cultural nuances I'd observed but never documented. There's something I haven't told you about Prague, I said. Callie's expression grew serious. What? My grandmother lived there before the war? She was a translator too. Actually, she spoke Czech, German, Russian, and English. She helped Jewish families escape before the Nazis came. I paused, feeling the weight of family history I'd never fully explored. She died when I was 10, but she used to tell me stories about the bridges in Prague, how they connected different worlds. You never mentioned her? I suppose I never thought my family history was interesting compared to your artistic vision. I laughed softly, but maybe it's all connected. Maybe this has been building toward something larger than either of us imagined. Collie reached across the table, taking my hands in hers. Tell me about her, so I did. I told her about grandmother Eva, who had kept a salon in Prague where artists and intellectuals gathered to discuss ideas and plan resistance activities. I told her about the photographs Eva had saved, images of a cosmopolitan city where cultures blended and creativity flourished before darkness fell across Europe. I told her about the letters Eva had written to my grandfather. Letters I'd never translated because they felt too personal, too painful. She sounds extraordinary, Collie said when I finished. She was. And I think she'd love what we're planning. She believed in the power of stories to change hearts, to build bridges between different worlds. Then let's build some bridges. Planning our Prague adventure became a project unto itself. I discovered that Callie's spontaneous nature had not prepared her for the bureaucratic realities of international residencies, visa applications, insurance requirements, shipping regulations for photography equipment. How did you get accepted for this program without knowing you'd need a work permit? I asked, reading through the mountain of paperwork she'd enthusiastically ignored. I figured we'd work it out when we got there. I stared at her, then burst out laughing. You're completely insane. Insane enough to fall in love with a beautiful woman in a convenience store at midnight? Point taken. I threw myself into the logistics with the same intensity I'd once reserved for diplomatic translations. Visa applications were completed. In triplicate. Insurance policies were researched and purchased. Shipping manifests were prepared with meticulous detail. I even created a shared digital calendar color-coded, naturally tracking everything from vaccination requirements to apartment hunting timelines. You're like a one-woman embassy, Collie observed, watching me navigate Czech bureaucracy with increasingly fluent phone calls. I'm rusty on the language, but it's coming back. I paused in my typing. Actually, that's not true. I'm not rusty, I was never truly fluent. I studied Czech in college because of family history, but I never had occasion to use it professionally. And now I'm having dreams in Czech. It's like the language has been sleeping in my brain, waiting for the right moment to wake up. The night before our departure, we lay in Callie's bed, surrounded by half-packed suitcases and photography equipment. She'd been unusually quiet all evening, and I could sense something weighing on her mind. Second thoughts? I asked, not about Prague, about us. She rolled over to face me. Claire, what if we get there and discover we don't work as well together? Professionally as we do personally, it was a fair concern. We'd built our relationship in the spaces between our professional lives. Prague would be different. We'd be working together, living together, navigating a foreign country together 24 hours a day. What if we do work well together and discover we're capable of creating something extraordinary? What if the age difference becomes more obvious when we're around other artists? What if it doesn't matter? What if I'm not sophisticated enough for the international art world? I propped myself up on one elbow, studying her face in the dim light. This was new territory. Kali had always been the confident one, the one who believed in taking risks and trusting the universe. Seeing her vulnerable, uncertain, made her even more beautiful to me. Kali Butler, I said firmly, you are the most sophisticated person I know. Not because of what you know about wine, or art history, or proper diplomatic protocol. Because you see the world with fresh eyes every single day. Because you believe in the power of images to tell truth. Because you're brave enough to document the stories that other people overlook. What if I silenced her with a kiss? What if we stop asking what if and start asking what's possible? She smiled, some of the tension leaving her shoulders. What's possible? Everything. Absolutely everything. Our last week in New York took on a dreamlike quality. Every mundane task, grocery shopping, laundry, meeting with clients, felt weighted with significance. These were our last times doing these things in this city as the people we'd been. I found myself documenting moments the way Kali had taught me to see them. The way morning light fell across our coffee cups in the diner where we'd had so many important conversations. The precise chaos of her dark room, soon to be dismantled and shipped overseas. The view from her fire escape where we'd shared cigarettes and secrets and planned impossible futures. You're becoming a photographer, she observed, catching me taking mental pictures of her as she worked. I'm becoming someone who pays attention. Same thing. On our final night, she surprised me with tickets to a performance I'd mentioned wanting to see months earlier, a chamber music concert featuring Russian composers. We dressed up, me in a black dress that made me feel elegant, her in a vintage suit that showcased her androgynous beauty. You remembered, I said as we settled into our seats. I remember everything you tell me. The music washed over us, Rachmaninoff, Stravinsky, composers who had bridged different eras and styles, who had found beauty in transition and transformation. I thought about the parallels to our own story, the way love had transformed us both into people we barely recognized during intermission. As we sipped wine in the lobby, I noticed other couples around us. Some had been together for decades, finishing each other's sentences with the comfortable synchronization of lone partnership. Others were clearly new to each other, every gesture charged with the electricity of early attraction. Where do you think we fit in this spectrum? I asked Kali. She followed my gaze, studying the other couples. I think we're in a category. All our own. Not new, not old. Something else entirely. Which is revolutionary. I laughed. Revolutionary? Think about it. 6 months ago, you were translating other people's words, and I was documenting other people's stories. Now we're about to embark on creating something entirely new together. We're not following anyone else's relationship template or career model. We're writing our own rules. As we returned to our seats for the second half of the concert, I felt the truth of her words settling into my bones. We were revolutionary, not because we were two women in love, though that carried its own power, but because we had decided to build something unprecedented on the foundation of what we'd discovered together. The final piece was Stravinsky's The Rite of Spring. And as the music built to its explosive conclusion, I felt something similar building in my chest. Anticipation, readiness, the sense of standing at the edge of something vast. An unknown, absolutely right. When the music ended and the audience erupted in applause, Kali took my hand and leaned close to whisper in my ear, "Ready for Prague?" I squeezed her fingers, feeling the calluses from years of photography work, the slight stain of developer that never quite washed clean, the warmth that had become as necessary to me as breathing. Ready for anything,